Why did we come up with, or how did we come up with these 8 steps? How is it we know that these steps will in fact stop outages? And so to answer that, I guess I would rewind just a little bit and sort of tell the story of how they came about. We focus on the largest companies in the world: banks, retailers, insurance, healthcare, et cetera, et cetera. And they all have had this problem. They have experienced outages, and they have at times been extremely painful and costly. So we've worked for many years now to help them. And at the same time that we educate customers, we learn from them. So as we've engaged with customers in this way, in this partnering kind of way, what we learned is some of our customers have still experienced outages from time to time, but other customers were able to completely eliminate them. And it brought up this obvious question: what's the difference between a customer who has stopped outages and one who is still experiencing them? So we went and did the research. I went, and a few other people went, and we interviewed customers. We talked to them about what were their practices on a daily, weekly, monthly, basis. How had they deployed our product? What features were they using? What were they not using? And then got the same data from customers who were still struggling, that they were having outages from time to time. And there was a very consistent pattern among the customers who said, we haven't had an outage in X period of time, right? A year, 2 years, or so on. In a lot of ways, coming up with the 8 was the easiest thing in the world, because all we had to do was go ask the people who had done it. But that's where the 8 came from. And that's why our confidence that the 8 steps will actually stop outages is so high. When we engage with prospects as they become new customers, one of the common threads among all of them is they are responding to a tactical problem, right? They had an outage, and that initiated the creation of a project, the budgeting of a project. Somebody said, go fix this, right? So they need a result. They need a result in the short term. At the same time, we know from our experience that eliminating outages on a permanent basis across the entirety of the enterprise is a longer-term undertaking, because you're transforming behaviors across the entirety of the enterprise. So the importance of the first step, which is have an outage safety net, is that this step delivers the immediate benefit of stopping the largest number of outages in the shortest period of time. So let me describe it in a little bit more detail. The outage safety net is a way to bring attention at an enterprise-wide level that there's an outage about to happen. This is nothing new to any large enterprise. Now, they may not have used it. In fact, I think they've never used it until we introduce it. But they do have a mechanism in place that allows them to highlight enterprise-wide a point of significant concern that must be dealt with. It's usually talked about in terms of vulnerability management or something like that. So, for instance, if a vulnerability is discovered in, say, the Apache software, every large enterprise has a mechanism that allows them to take that bit of knowledge, inject it into a system, and disseminate that awareness across their enterprise so that everyone who touches that technology becomes aware and reacts to it. Outage Safety Net is nothing more than exercising that mechanism around outages, because when a certificate expires, it is a Sev 1 event, right? It can be a very high severity event. The interesting observation I would make is that you don't have to wait. With an outage, unlike a vulnerability, which may happen tomorrow and you have no warning, an outage, you have warning. You know the day on which it's going to occur. You don't know where it's going to occur, but you know when. And so when you detect that a certificate is near to its expiry date, if you inject that information into the alerting mechanism, that already likely exists, then you enable the whole enterprise to mobilize against preventing that outage. So we roll out the outage safety net because it's like the fire alarm, right? You start first by having a good fire department, right? A good mechanism to respond to fires. And then that buys you time to work on fire prevention. Then the enterprise works on the steps, the 7 remaining steps, to prevent outages in a more sustainable way. So step 2 is about laying the technology foundation for how you're going to solve this problem, how you're going to stop outages. It's not done by enabling one small team to do the work on behalf of the whole organization. It's done by having one small team roll out a service so that everyone in the organization can help themselves. And so you got to have a platform in place that facilitates that self-service approach to solving the problem. The second piece that you need to have present in your technology platform is the right kinds and the right number of integrations. Keep in mind, when we talk about outages, we're really talking about certificates, which are one form of a machine identity. It's important to think about why the machine identity term is significant, because it describes the actual role of the certificate. With such a broad range of machine types, you need to roll out a platform that allows you to talk to and integrate with, in the necessary way, with every one of those different types of machines. So the breadth and depth of the ecosystem is the second important pillar of the technology foundation for stopping outages. So then the third important pillar in the technology foundation is what I would describe as kind of the latent capabilities around, how do you see, how does it give you the visibility of what's out there? We have an explosion in the number of machines because of cloud computing, because of the mandate to encrypt everywhere, because of IoT, because of lots of drivers, right? So the number of machines is growing exponentially, and you need a platform that's going to help you sort through what to pay attention to, right? This is forest management, right? Not individual tree care. That intelligence, right, is essential to the platform's capability. So visibility, the intelligence, and then automation because of the scale, right? So you've got to have the ability to automate in as many ways as possible. Automate the approvals, automate the installations, automate the generation, automate as many elements as you can to manage this incredibly fast-growing problem. So as you roll out that platform, then the ability for that platform to support self-service, the ability for that platform to provide integrations across a vast ecosystem, and the ability of that platform to give you visibility, intelligence, and automation that lets you work at scale so that you harness the power of the entire enterprise to solve the problem. So the third step in stopping outages is to get the whole organization aligned around a service-based approach. The technology needs to enable that. But remember, it's not just technology, it's also people and process. And the people have to buy in. They have to understand what their role is. Now, there's a pretty good reference. In fact, there's a great reference guide in NIST 1800-16B, which talks about how you work with certificates. And it not only describes specific policies and things you should do, things you shouldn't do. It's a great framework, but it also outlines the roles and responsibilities organizationally. How do the different roles in an organization each have to interact with a certificate, right? Who has to request them? Who has to install them? Who has to create them and approve them and so forth? So codifying the roles and responsibilities and then educating everyone across the enterprise about that's the essence of step 3, aligning the organization around a service-based approach to stopping outages. So step 4 in the process of stopping outages is to define and design the service offering. That reduces to a couple of key points. One is to get the policies in place. The service has to be for the purpose of helping the organization comply with the policies while delivering the value they need to deliver, right? To do their job in a policy compliant way. So the NIST 1816B document is a great reference to help outline policies, to help guide you in the formation and creation of policies. The kinds of policies that typically are needed are things such as a policy that every certificate has to be renewed at least 30 days prior to its expiration. We then build a service that helps to comply with that. So first, we define the policies. Then we have to design the service. The service is going to interact with workflows. It's going to interact with technology. Let's say, for instance, you're going to offer a service for your IIS web server administrators. Then the technology that the service is built on has to be configured, enabled, designed to execute, to deliver that integration. So in the beginning stages, what a customer typically does is define the policies and decide, here are the services we're going to offer. We're going to offer automation here, we're going to offer key generation, et cetera, et cetera. Once those definitions, once those policies are created and the service definitions are written, then you have the foundation to now go begin creating and rolling out that service. So step 5 is to train the teams that will run, that will operate, and who are responsible for that service, and to document the processes that team uses. It's a pretty simple step to describe. So simple, I think there are times when folks underappreciate the importance of executing well on this step. It's essential that the teams who are building and running this service really understand the technology they're working with, the technology they're building with, and they understand the integration points that they're going to have across all the different technologies and use cases in the enterprise. What we found in the successful customers, those who stopped outages, was it became a systematic approach where, in spite of staff turnover or changes that might happen in the organization, the next person up could step in, perform the necessary functions, and keep the service running as designed. So step 6 in the process of stopping outages is to get the early adopters onboarded. So it involves recruiting them, training them, and actually getting them onboarded and using this new service. The recruiting process, although I'm mentioning it here as part of step 6, it typically starts earlier. As you're defining and designing the service, as you're selecting the technology, it's pretty common to then engage early one or more of the teams that you plan to bring on as early adopters. Who's a good candidate for an early adopter? Remember, we're trying to stop outages and we're trying to stop them in the fastest time possible. So a very natural starting point is to select an early adopter team who's responsible for the largest concentrations of certificates. That tends to be a load balancer team. Maybe it's a NetScaler, F5, etc. It might be a web server team. And when you have the early adopter team coming on, you have a chance to begin testing and formulating that end user education program. And when you get them, it means you're delivering the biggest benefit early on. Not only do those steps enable you to test and validate all of the work to this point, that it's actually functioning and doing what you intended, but there's another really big benefit. Early wins give you the power to keep growing the service. The teams across the enterprise need to see what they're getting. They need to see that the service is going to deliver the promised results. And the early adopter team is a great way to demonstrate that real benefit. So step 7 is to expand the rollout across the enterprise. As each new group of users is onboarded to the service, the end user education program, again, is really important. But let me describe a little bit about the way successful organizations get the users to want to onboard. It happens a couple different ways. Number one, they construct an internal marketing campaign or program, if you will. So this often consists of identifying in advance the specific organizations that they want to be on the service. These are lines of business, these are application owners, these are technology stack owners. They begin actively communicating to those groups, inviting them. A lot of customers will have standing Q&A sessions, they'll have online webinars or open houses or any number of different communication mechanisms to describe the service offering, to describe its benefits, to invite users to learn about it, and then to come on board. There's one specific approach that is especially effective, although I would describe it as kind of the backup approach. When the outage safety net gets activated, there's a prime candidate identified for coming onto the service. When a certificate hits 29 days before expiration, the outage safety net gets triggered, and the whole organization now knows that there is a group, there is an individual, an app owner, whoever is responsible for that certificate, and they're currently being unsuccessful at fulfilling their responsibility. And there's the service ready to help them. So a lot of customers will actually mandate that if an individual or organization triggers the outage safety net, their usage of the service is now required. Expanding the rollout across the whole enterprise can take some time. The more targeted and crisp your communications are about why they should use the service and how they will benefit, the more quickly the onboarding will happen and the more quickly the outages will stop. So step 8 is really to fine-tune the service, right? You're assessing how it's working, you're assessing how the recruitment is working, and generally adapting and improving. Workshops, webinars, open houses, email campaigns, posters in the lunchroom. I mean, there's all kinds of techniques. And some organizations find that they start with some practices, and then over time, they determine which are the most effective in their organization or in different parts of their organization. And so that's one example of how the fine-tuning can happen. Let me describe a common evolution of the service that requires adaptation. You have a group who onboards, and they use the service to request certificates. They like it, and they learn that the service is capable of automating the installation of those certificates, so they no longer have to do that. So they come back to you, and they want to now use more of the service. They want to use automation. There's a really common way that the service has to change and evolve. As you think about that natural evolution, one of the things that you're likely to experience is that a number of big users come on board. You see material benefits. Outages drop significantly, and there'll be a temptation to relax. But there's danger in that approach. And so let me tell you how the most successful organizations have responded to that. They continue to work hard to get the adoption across every part of the enterprise, not just as every part that exists, but to make it a part of the culture that anytime a new technology is introduced, anytime a new application is introduced, that part of that introduction is an education and awareness of the machine identity protection program that offers this certificate as a service. This is especially important and these days exceedingly common that applications and technologies are being introduced in the cloud. DevOps teams are rolling out all kinds of new things, maybe in AWS, there may be new architectures, any number of new approaches to building something. And the service offering that you have has to evolve with those new applications, with those new technologies. So the need to just really keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening, what the service needs to be, and how it's being adopted is critical. Or you may find yourself falling behind and beginning to experience an increase in outages. As you're recruiting, one of the other things that you have to continue to watch and evolve on is the actual service offering itself. Is your service offering still meeting the needs of the broad organization? Does it have the capabilities that are needed in today's environment? You may roll your service out, but we all know how quickly the technology landscape is changing. The introduction of DevOps-related tool chains and cloud computing environments has dramatically accelerated the use of new technologies and the introduction of new applications. You roll your service out now, and a year from now, or 2 years from now, your service offering may need to look very different than it does today. So continuing to evolve with the evolution of technology and the growth of the business is also essential. So another driver for why your service needs to evolve over time, beyond keeping up with new technologies, is to compensate for human error. A group will sign up for the service. They'll begin using it. And they'll request certificates and then manually go install those certificates. Application owners, when they work with certificates, they make mistakes. And it happens in part because they do this infrequently. Right? If a certificate expires once a year, this is something they're doing only once a year. So a common part of the service offering to combat the propensity for human error is to roll out validation, where the platform now automatically, after dispensing a certificate to an application owner, it automatically checks on a nightly basis to see if that certificate is fully in place and active, alerting if it hasn't been successfully installed. When human errors get detected through validation, then it creates an environment for the next level of evolution. It not only helps prevent the human error, but it also recoups that person's time. So a lot of services will start with this ability to request a certificate and a validation to see if certificate owners are doing the right thing. But then after a period of time, they evolve to start automating the humans out of the picture. It's a very natural and common process. So when we looked at the most successful customers, automation was a big part of what they did. And not only because it helped eliminate the human error and thereby further reduce outages, but also because of the time it recouped for their teams. Every info security team struggles to have enough time to do all the things they need to do. So the hallmark of every successful program for stopping outages included heavy dependence on automation, and that's what every customer should be looking to do.